Hey everybody! I thought I'd make a little cold hardy citrus tasting video here. I got a bunch of fruit from Stan McKenzie shipped over here along with some budwood so I could grow out some of these varieties. But of course, before deciding which ones I wanted to grow more of, I wanted to review their tastes, reviewed them with my wife too, and we put together a whole list of descriptions of these fruit. And it gets pretty specific too, so I'll include this in the description and maybe even the comments so everyone can see it. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to not only Stan McKenzie, but Tough Citrus on YouTube, who recently did a tasting video on the Sacaton Citrumelo. And of course, we can't forget about Virginia Fruit Grower, who's a big one. I've watched a lot of his videos, and he shared some stuff with me too, but he has a lot of varieties and probably a lot of his own opinions on these fruit too that you see here. So I'm going to share some of my own thoughts about these with you now. As you can see, we have not only the fruits themselves, but also, some more than others, the juices as well. We made some citrus aids with these where we diluted them with some water and sugar at the same ratio for all of these so we could taste them not only as a fruit, but also as a juice. The fruit we have in front of us here, the Sacaton Citrumelo, the Dunstan Citrumelo, US-852 Citrandarin, which is a Changsha mandarin and trifoliate orange. These are both grapefruit and trifoliate orange. The Citremon, which this is some sort of lemon and trifoliate orange. And this cool one here, I'm surprised I got a fruit of these, the dragon lime. So this is actually a half orange, half trifoliate orange, I believe, and specifically the flying dragon variety because this has the same contorted stems. So we can go through them. I'm thinking we can start actually with the dragon lime first, just because this one was actually one of the more disappointing ones of the group. I'm wondering whether or not it had to do with the fruit being not fully ripe. Some people say online that you can pick these green and use them like a lime. It's somewhat lime-like, but it was very, very bitter, so I do wonder how these taste when they're fully ripened. But we'll just go kind of through the notes, which I have in front of me here, and I will include again. But as you can see, compared to the others, the fruit size is small, weighing in at just 40 grams per fruit on average here. The amount of seeds, these are usually seedless. We did have a couple seeds in this one, so I'm curious if those are sterile, if they will grow out or not. The quality of the fruit as a whole, though, I found it to be somewhat poor, at least at this stage of picking. The taste was lime-like, but exceedingly bitter and a bit resinous too, almost like a trifoliate orange, but much stronger, which surprised me that this fruit could actually be more bitter than one of its parents. But the smell of this fruit was a lot like a mix between a lime, a sweet orange, and a trifoliate orange. The juice it produced was quite low, the acidity was high, and the bitterness was high, of course. And the bricks came in at 10. Now I also added a category for trifoliate influence, which is just, I guess, kind of how much the trifoliate orange may have influenced the taste or characteristics of these fruit. And for this one, I thought it was pretty high, actually. Now its uses, I couldn't really think of much. As it was, it didn't really make a good citrus aid, which is kind of like the next category we did as well. I thought the citrus aid was okay, but just too bitter. Again, it did have some limey flavors, which was interesting. It has potential, but at this stage, I just don't think it's really worth using. So that's the dragon lime there. Now we can go on to the Citremon, which this guy is really cool looking. As you can see, it kind of has these little bumps. It almost looks like a pumpkin when they're on the tree there. Very citron-like, Buddha's hands-like. And the fragrance is actually quite interesting on these. We like this one a lot in some kind of unexpected ways. It's not just a lemon or a lemon substitute. The quality we thought was actually very good. This was very much like a a citrus from like another country or another world. It's like a citrus we haven't tasted before, but quality-wise, it felt like something you could find at the grocery store. It's just something interesting, like a novelty citrus. The flavor was like a clean lemon taste, but with some sort of savory, maybe herbal component. We described it as umami. It's like a lemon, but with umami, if you can imagine that. That was our best description of it. The smell is lemon and trifoliate mixed. That does come out a little more in the peel and the smell of the trifoliate. But we found that this would probably go good with maybe rosemary or chicken. This could go good in certain dishes here. The amount of juice it provides too is kind of medium on the scale. A good amount of juice, but not an exceeding amount. The acidity was pretty high, and the bitterness, we'll call it medium-low. There was a little present, but not too much. Sweetness was low, not completely non-existent like the dragon lime here. There was a little bit, but not really much to work with there, and the Brix came in at 9 for this one. So trifoliate influence, I would say, is medium based on the smell and some of the characteristics, but really not bad at all. I don't think it's a bad thing despite it having more trifoliate influence. Uses, like I mentioned, culinary would be a big one for this one, and maybe liquor too. I don't know as much when it comes to the juice. The citrusade was exotic and tasty. That was the best way we could describe it, as exotic. It just had some kind of intriguing taste to it. I don't know if a lot of people would like it regularly, so I wouldn't say that's one of its primary uses. I think it's best used for culinary and liquor. Moving on to our US-852 Citrandrin here, which looks very orange-like or mandarin-like from the outside and the inside too. I will say the pulp vesicles moving on from the dragon lime all look very citrusy here, because traditionally with trifoliate, they kind of look a little different, almost softer, maybe more fused, less defined. They were very defined and even fell out in this one here. So they were kind of, maybe grainy is the right word. But this was actually a pretty good, but definitely intriguing fruit. It's not a normal mandarin necessarily. But you can tell by the size, it's bigger than these, maybe a medium-sized fruit. These came in at 130 grams on average. And they did have quite a bit of seeds. Maybe not as much as these Citrumelos here, but still a lot of seeds for a citrus fruit. About a medium size, maybe the same as you would find in a normal orange, or maybe more a lemon size. So the taste was let's call it a peculiar mandarin-like taste. It did taste very much like some sort of mandarin or clementine, maybe more on the mandarin side in the grocery store, because clementines can be a little more predictable here. This peculiar is the best way to describe it here. Peculiar or strange, or there's something here that you can't quite describe when you taste this. It's not the same as a normal trifoliate orange, but it's different. And it's unique. It's something you want to keep tasting and kind of trying to figure out. So maybe that's a good thing for people who like a little more complex fruits, which I personally do like. My wife didn't like it quite as much. Sometimes you just can't put your finger on these tastes, and maybe you don't like it for that reason. So it's a strange one, but a good one. It was fairly juicy, probably about medium on that scale with a medium acidity. Low bitterness. There wasn't much to detect here. You know, there's a little bit of trifoliate in the smell, but it's mostly mandarin. And that reflects in the bitterness too. It's not very bitter at all, at least that I found. And the sweetness was the most out of all these, actually. I found the sweetness to be kind of medium on that scale. And the Brix came in at 11, which was the highest percent out of all of these. So that was pretty good. Trifoliate influence, I would still say, is low for this one compared to the rest. Overall, it's very much its own thing, for better or for worse. It's a very interesting fruit. I think it's good for juice, preserves, culinary, liquor, anything along those lines. And the citrus aid that it made, diluted with water and sugar, was very sweet and tasty. So this one made a very good juice. I could see it being used for that more so than other things. So a little better as a juice actually than fresh eating. Some of those stranger flavors kind of get diluted away, while it just tastes very orangey as a juice. So that was a good one too. Moving on here, the Dunstan Citrumelo, which you can see this is quite a bigger fruit, just holding half of it here, and very seedy as well, large seeds there. This came in at 350 grams on average per fruit, so many large seeds, but the quality itself of the fruit I think was very good, almost like a less bitter grapefruit. So these were a little more sour, kind of maybe like a little more lemony in that sense, but I find these to be an improvement over a traditional grocery store grapefruit, which I think are actually more bitter than the Dunstan Citrumelo here. I don't really like grocery store grapefruits for that reason. They're rarely ever that good eaten out of hand, but this one was very interesting, and I think a lot of people shopping, if they picked one of these up, if you got past the seeds, as a fruit as a whole, if you can eat grapefruits, you can eat these with no problem. I do think they're even better than that. We did get to try too a less ripe Dunstan locally. This one's from Stan, and it's more ripe, it's more yellow. But we had one that was less ripe, it was greener, and it almost had more pomelo taste to it, and it was a little more sour. This one's a little more bitter, a little more grapefruit taste, but overall the Dunstan Citrumelo seems to have some sort of combination of pomelo, grapefruit, a little bit of trifoliate hidden in there. Definitely an interesting flavor profile overall. So it's pretty good in that sense, and the amount of juice it provides is quite a lot. So this and the Sacaton, both these are very juicy citrus fruit here, with a medium acidity as well, maybe even a medium high acidity, because it can be kind of lemon-like in that sense. Bitterness, I would say, is maybe medium low. You will detect some bitterness because it is kind of grapefruity, but really not that bad. Still good to eat out of hand, and in the juice, interestingly, you get a little more than eating it out of hand. It's a little more, even more grapefruity as a juice than as a fruit, but still very good. Kind of had a low sweetness, a little bit more in the juice form, but the bricks came in at 9 for this one. So I would say its uses probably similar to the citrandarin here. Juice, preserves, culinary liquor. This can make an interesting addition to a lot of those things, and I do think these are some of the higher quality citrus trifoliate hybrids out there. They have a lot of potential. They're just a little strange in some ways, a little different. You can see why these fruits aren't used commercially, but I think they have potential as a smaller scale, maybe farmer's market or niche fruit, with a lot of other uses like that. But the Dunstan makes a really good grapefruit substitute here. So sweet citrus aid, a little bitter, but very tasty overall. So can't complain about the Dunstan. And our last big guy here, these came in at a whopping 380 grams each, so much larger. You can see pretty cool with the stem there. And very large seeds, plenty of those to find here. The quality of these is also really good, and the flesh is quite soft too. A little softer, maybe a little less defined than the Dunstan, but overall they're both pretty soft fruits and very juicy. So the quality is very good. The taste, though, of the Sacaton was a little different from the Dunstan, because this was a little more like a sour orange grapefruit cross, so kind of in between those ways. And I mean literally a sour orange, not just an orange at the grocery store that's a little more sour, but the specific variety itself, the sour orange. So same with the aroma, it has like a sour orange, grapefruit, slight trifoliate. These all kind of have a little trifoliate in the aroma to a lot depending, but it had an interesting blend of all of those citrus in it. So very juicy as well, medium to high acidity. Bitterness maybe was a little higher actually than the Dunstan as a fruit, but I think as the lemonades, they actually were different in that the Sacaton was less bitter that way, whereas the Dunstan got more bitter as the Citrusade. So they kind of flip-flop depending if you eat them fresh or drink them as juices, where you get more bitterness from. The sweetness was fairly low, not non-existent, but fairly low, and the Brix came in at 7. I think the trifoliate influence for both of these is kind of like a medium-low. There is some, and I do think some of that bitterness comes from the trifoliate more than the grapefruit, but they're very similar. I think some of those flavonoids are probably shared between the trifoliate orange and the grapefruit, and sometimes you can't tell where it's quite coming from. Maybe you can tell if there's like a gumminess or a resin there that's a little more trifoliate than the grapefruit, but otherwise you can kind of get it from both of those. So medium-low trifoliate influence, similar uses as the Dunstan. I think this has a lot of potential for juicing, preserves, culinary, liquor, all those things. The taste of the juice as well, I found it to be like a 50-50 split between grapefruit and lemon. So if you made a grapefruit lemonade, that's exactly what this one is like here. So I found it to be really good and actually a little better than the Dunstan in that sense, because I find lemonade to be a little more pleasurable than grapefruit juice, but together it's very interesting and very tasty. So all of these would make great additions for any type of alcoholic beverage or cocktail you're making. As juices, they're very good. Obviously some better than others, some juicier than others. But this gives us a pretty good idea of some of the better and more edible citrus trifoliate hybrids. Again, some of them bring out qualities that are less desirable, even more so than the trifoliate orange, which can also be used for juice, preserves, things like that, but it does have to be processed quite a bit here. So look forward to future videos I will post on grafting and growing out these varieties. I plan on having and it's already in the works, a multi-grafted Citremelo plant here, as well as the original plant I did a video on, which has some varieties grafted onto it. Maybe we'll even get the chance to throw some of these onto it and see if it can survive a winter in New York, Zone 7A. So we're here in North Carolina, Zone 7B. We'll see how these do. They'd obviously do well for Stan McKenzie in South Carolina, where it's a little bit warmer, but I think some of these can even push it out here too. So I hope this information is helpful if you're considering these, and just to put it out there too, because I feel like we could use a little more information as to the overall quality of some of these varieties. Taste is obviously very subjective, and I do have a bit of tolerance for trifoliate orange myself, which is why I include my wife on these taste tests, and do realize that the data and the information provided here is a composite and a blend of both of our opinions on these things. So someone who's more and less into these particular fruit, and it gives you a pretty good idea on these things. So hopefully some of this objective data can kind of help you in making decisions or just overall learning more about these fruit. I did also include, and you'll see here, Citradia. We did get to try that one too, so I just included some notes. I didn't at the time think about all the rest of these and putting them all out together and kind of doing a little video. This was a little more impromptu, but I'm happy to do it and kind of put it out there. So hopefully you can enjoy the information on all of these, and do check out the other people that I mentioned. The cold hardy citrus world is fairly small, but I do think it will expand over time as traditional citrus areas have more trouble growing with the greening going on. They're figuring out how to approach that, but I think there is some missing potential here in colder regions in the United States where citrus can be grown, but we just don't have the widest array of tasty fruit to work with. So in time, I do hope to improve on some of these in my own work. I'm going to grow out seeds and kind of hybridize some things, and that's all very long term. So hopefully I will be able to keep you updated with that as well. Other than that, enjoy the notes. I hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye for now.